Good evening and a warm welcome to our guest speaker, Mr. Jyoti Bhushan Koul, all members, my EC team, past chairman if they have joined in, any members from IIMM Western region if they have joined in, and guests. We have a very interesting topic today by a very eloquent speaker.
As his profile goes as a business continuity management, okay, so he's a lead and works with MERS Global Center in India as well as China and Philippines. So it's a big area. He's leading the efforts of business continuity, and I'm sure it's not that easy. He's leading the global BCM improvement program. Led the global level implement business continuity management at MERS client between 15 and 18 this years. Work as a head of supply chain operations in organizations like Xerox and IIMM Networks. And definitely today, how the business continuity impacts the supply chain, and he's going to really make us aware the larger insights, how the risk is to be managed in supply chain. So definitely we are eager to hear it further. From the certification standpoint, a very prestigious ISO 22301. So BCM, aware of that, it's not that easy to implement that ISO standard. CBIC, ISO, OSHA, so I think he's well versed with all the necessities of carrying out the business and manage the risk. So just to note, CBCI stands for Certification of Business Continuity Institute of London. Further, I think you can be amazed. He's a certified as a master black belt in Lean Six Sigma. I think one of the favorite topic personally for me, and as a Prince 2 trained in project management. And I'm sure, Mr. Koul, you can touch base couple of things also during speech or some experience on the last line. We'll be really obliged with that experience. So with that, I welcome you once again, and we are very, very eager to hear from you going on the next 1 hour. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Parker, and my thanks go out to Mr. Terence and Mr. Nair and the entire Indian Institute of Materials Management Pune branch for inviting me for this session. Let me share my screen first, and just a quick confirmation that you are able to see the screen. So I think as Mr. Parker introduced the topic, we'll talk about basics of risk management and some touch points with business continuity management. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about some of the risks and mitigation of opportunities or options we have as supply chain managers. And how does supply chain management and risk management come in together? Okay, there are two basic topics. First is basics of risk management. And the second one, which we'll come to, is the supply chain risk management and mitigation. My session, I think, will go for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then let me go straight to the sessions. Okay. Now, I think just to set some context here. I'm sure most of you are aware that the risk profile in the world has changed in the last 20, 30 years. Lot of risks that we would always think that it doesn't happen here, it happens. If you go back into history from 9/11 to 26/11 to Y2K to 2015 Chennai floods, Kerala floods, and and now the COVID, we would always think that these would not happen here, this would happen somewhere else, but that is not the case. And I think that's what we need to keep always in mind, that if there is a risk and it can materialize in any form, howsoever small the probability is, we have to take cognizance of the risk. And if we do not do so, I think that's where we are creating a problem for ourselves. And I'll just give you a little bit of snippet on this. The pandemic that we are facing today on COVID, I'm not sure how many of you are aware that World Health Organization has a pandemic response procedure in place. And you may be surprised that in our company, we wrote that pandemic response procedure for our organization 5 years back. We even did a simulation exercise. And guess where we did it? We did it in China. and China was the place where the pandemic actually started. So that's and I think I've had people telling me, why are we doing this? Why why are we doing this? It doesn't happen here. It won't happen to that extent. But then it is happening. I think that's the change in mindset that we need when we are talking of risk in the current context.
Mr.
Okay.
Kaul, just a moment, please.
Yeah.
I would request Abhijit Survasai to please switch off his camera so that we get better bandwidth. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So fundamentally, what we have to keep in mind that anything that can happen, we need to be prepared as an organization. It will, of course, depend. The extent of preparation will, of course, depend at in what geographies and in what businesses and in what areas we operate. So that's the key message from this slide, to just set the context before we get into the actual activities. Now, we talked about business continuity management. What is business continuity management? And it is a relatively new topic which has come up very strongly in the last 10-15 years. But business continuity is basically the capability of an organization to continue the delivery of products and services, even if there is a disruption. Now, the technicalities there are that there is an acceptable time frame, there is a predefined capacity, all those what we call in layman's language, we call it contingency, SLAs, and all that thing is defined. But basically, it is the capability of an organization to continue working even if there is a disruption. Now, for any organization to do this, risk assessment is an integral part. So going back to the top of the slide where I've written an equation, business continuity plan is a function of risk assessment, business impact assessment, and there is a constant part to this equation. Risk assessment we'll talk in detail. Business impact assessment is a topic of a different session. Basically talks about identifying what are the top critical aspects of your business. So if you have a contingency, if you have a disruption, what is it that you would like to address first? Or what is it that you would like to recover first in a disruption? So that's the business impact exercise. Constant are all the contact details, policies, procedures, all the other stuff. But point here is that if you want to be prepared as an organization to take care of disruptions, to take care of contingencies, you have to, among other things, have a risk assessment in place. That is the fundamental point I'm trying to make here, and that's why and this is one of the messages that I keep drilling into my business folks, that guys, business continuity plan is not about filling a template. It is about understanding your risk profile, understanding what are the risks to your business, understanding what are the mitigation options, identifying what are the critical aspects of business, and then writing down, okay, what are your recovery options? So that is where risk assessment becomes extremely, extremely important and critical for any organization to make sure that they are able to continue delivery of products and services if there is a problem. So that's kind of trying to bring it in context with what is business continuity management. Okay, I'll continue from here. Let me. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so page down. Okay, now before we get into the details of risk management, a little bit of basic definitions, and you will find all these. Students, keep it at the last slide, please. So you'll find many of these definitions. These are part of standards, ISO standards. For risk management, the most common ISO standard used is 31000, and you'll find all these definitions there. But I just want to kind of create a basic understanding, especially for people who may be new to this subject. For people who are experts in this or veterans in this, it is just a bit of a review. What is risk? Risk is an effect of uncertainty on objectives, meaning that if there was a planned objective, if there was a planned expectation, if it doesn't happen because of certain environmental issues, that is the risk. It could be positive, it could be negative. Okay. And as a part of risk management, well, for any organization to have a proper risk management program in place, it has to have a set of activities which are coordinated and which take into account an end-to-end process. So from risk assessment, you start with risk assessment, you identify the risks, you analyze the risk, evaluate the risk, and once you have evaluated the risk, you treat them. There are various types of various things that you do in treatment, very commonly called the 4Ts: treat, transfer, tolerate, terminate. So this is the overall risk management process. Now there are a few things here that before you start into a risk management process, you as an organization you need to identify what your risk appetite is. So what is risk appetite? Risk appetite is the quantum of risk that your organization is willing to accept. That you're okay to your organization says I am okay, or the organization is okay to live with this amount of risk, and if that risk materializes, the organization is capable to take care of the impact that would happen. So these are some of the basics in risk management. I'll continue. Next one. Yeah, a little bit of more detail on this. When we do risk analysis, we have to understand what is the nature of risk, what are its characteristics, and what is the level. We have to understand, we do an exercise called the calculation of risk value. So what is risk value? First, we find out, when we have identified the risks, what is the probability of occurrence. So it means in our knowledge of all the associated people, we think that this probability of occurrence is high. For example, you might say floods, monsoon floods in Bombay, the probability in the monsoon season is always high. A typhoon in Chennai could be a very high risk today. Pandemic, most of the time people would say no, low, but do this now, everybody is going to say pandemic is a very high risk. Nowadays, something like a cyber attack or a data management issue is generally considered as a very high risk, where the probability is taken as very high. Then you look at what is the impact. What could this impact have to the organization? So multiplication of the impact and the probability, that is consequence and likelihood, that gives us the risk value. This risk value is compared with the risk appetite, which is called risk evaluation. And basis that, if the risk value is within the risk appetite, then you may choose to live with it. You may just monitor it. But if it is not, then you have to action it. That is, you have to treat it. So that's a generic flow that happens in how risk has to be managed in an organization. Most of it, what I am talking, is derived from the ISO standard. It is a part of business continuity, and it is a part of the risk management ISO standards as well. Okay, going forward. Okay. Now, if you have if you have identified the risk, you have evaluated the risk. Okay. Now, if I just kind of in a very simplistic way put it, that risks above the risk appetite have to be addressed. There are four T's as the options. There are control plans or control mechanisms put in place to both prevent the occurrence of the risk, or even if we cannot prevent the occurrence, we modify the risk, or we address the impact. We try to reduce the impact of the risk. Whatever risk is left off after all treatment is called residual risk. And if residual risk is within the risk appetite, you monitor. If it is above the risk appetite and you cannot do anything further, it has to be signed off by the management. That's why I said in the previous slide, management support is critical for entire risk management process. Okay, so I think I will. Okay, a little bit of a summary of what I said as a process. How does a general risk management process look like? Now, I can do this in a simple flowchart. Instead of doing that, I just put it in a simple sheet just to make it a little bit easier to understand. There are 4 critical steps on the left-hand side: identify, analyze, evaluate, treat. You identify the risk, you analyze. So what you do in analyze, you do an impact assessment, you do a probability of occurrence assessment, you calculate the risk value. You evaluate the risk value and compare it with the risk appetite. If the risk is within the risk appetite, you don't do anything, you monitor. However, if the risk is not within the risk appetite, you treat. If there is a risk which cannot be treated, on the right hand side, you tolerate and you have management approval. If now, in case you have treated the risk and the risk value is still above the risk appetite, you repeat the cycle. You analyze again, you evaluate again, you do the same process, and you come back to treat again. This cycle has to go on. Typically, in an enterprise level risk management exercise, this cycle is done 2 to 3 times. You have a gross risk, you have a residual risk, you have a target risk. Unless and until the final target risk or residual risk is within the risk appetite, you continue actions, you identify newer actions. If you cannot do anything, you have to go to management and make them aware that this is a risk, we cannot address it, therefore it needs to be signed off. Or rather, business needs to be aware of what the risks are. This is the summary of the entire risk assessment and treatment process. I think I will take a 10-second pause because I'll have a sip of water, and I will. What I've done is I have collected some of the risks that are generally seen in a supply chain management activities, and I referred to some of the international journals from Business Continuity Institute, and these are in the last 2 years. These are the keep it here. These are the major risks that have been identified. So we call it a risk library. So what we're saying is we've given you a library of a variety of risks that are observed in supply chain management. Okay, so you take this library and you step forward. With this library, you can go back to the previous slide and where I said use the steps of identifying. Sorry about this. I think you need to let me handle the controls. Okay. So you need to go back to the process. You need to go back to the process and use this process to work on the risk library and identify which are the top risks to your organization. Continuing this discussion on the supply chain, how do we see supply chain risk management? Now, supply chain risk management is a combination of you need the risk management function or risk management professionals to help you with the risk management process. And you need the supply chain management people to bring in supply chain management subject matter expertise. So supply chain risk management process has to be a combination of supply chain management expertise and risk management expertise. That's why we said it is the intersection of supply chain management and risk management, and collaboration is the key. The two functions have to work together to be able to identify the right risks for any organization and address those risks. These risks could be around production, procurement, transportation, shipment, demand and supply, you name it. Whatever the risks are, the two functions have to work together. Taking it forward from there. Yes, I got it back. Good. Sorry about this, but I think this is the most interesting slide where supply chain management and risk management comes in together. Now there are paradigms. There is a bit of a you could say some kind of a contradiction or some kind of a conflicting priorities. In supply chain management, reducing our costs is a big priority. I find it is the biggest priority, and which leads us to globalizing our supply chains. Once we globalize our supply chains, we make them more vulnerable and complex. So we are increasing the risk. A supply chain manager would want to reduce cost, but the risk manager will tell him that by doing globalization, you are increasing the risk. You have to reach a balance. The balance has to be right. Look at outsourcing. Outsourcing has been the buzzword in supply chain management in the last few years, but it leads to loss of control. So the risk manager will kind of raise his hand that you are increasing the risk to your business. Similarly, just-in-time and lean practices, very efficient, very cost-effective. Inventory is cut down, cycle time is reduced, but then efficiency is very high. Is effectiveness high? A slightest glitch in your supply process, your production gets impacted, your delivery gets impacted, the risk increases. Consolidation of suppliers has been a important factor in supply chain management. But then, if you consolidate too many suppliers into too few suppliers, you run the risk, what we in risk management call a single point of failure. If that major supplier goes down, you are in trouble. So there is a balance to be achieved between supply chain management and risk management. Right now, many of the manufacturing organizations are looking for local suppliers. Compare it with the fact that we were going all for global suppliers. Just in time, a wonderful concept in manufacturing, but today in the COVID scenario, it is being questioned. So there is a bit of an interaction required. That's why I said collaboration is the key between supply chain management and risk management to understand, okay, what is it that is okay for us to do? And keeping this in mind, what I have done is just created a small table. And that's the major part of what I was trying to say. And I think I will try to wrap up with a summary now. I've just summarized a few things that we talked about in terms of risk management, how it is essential, and how it is an integral part of business continuity management. We need to have both proactive and reactive mitigations. We prioritize our key suppliers, and speed of response is critical. We need to review our customer contracts. How many of us do that? I don't know. Because there are risks in the customer contracts. There are clauses there which can pose grave risk to organizations if they are not studied properly. And there is a tendency in many of our colleagues from sales to close a contract without even getting it legally vetted. And many organizations, including ours today, have a legal team which reviews all contracts, make sure that to identify if there are any risks in the contract, in the language it is written, and the way it is written. We also need to go into tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers to ensure that our supply network is diversified and supply network is strengthened. Supplier evaluation process I talked about, technology I talked about. A lot of companies are investing very heavily into artificial intelligence and blockchain and data analytics and other things. And one of the things we need to also focus on is our social responsibility in supply chain management. We need to address the risk of other smaller suppliers in terms of our payment, timely payments. Okay, I think that's all I had, and I will leave you with two simple comments, two simple points. That's the last slide. Whatever mitigation strategies you have, whatever risks you have identified, you need to test them. You need to test those mitigation strategies. There is a common saying we use that a contingency plan is not worth the paper it is written on if it is not tested. So testing is critical for all risk mitigation strategies. And the second one, which is very important, that if everybody says we want to be prepared for a risk, but how many are willing to make the investment and decisions upfront? So if you want to be prepared for the occurrence of the risk, you have to make investments upfront and decisions upfront. These two, I think, are very, very critical things regarding risk management. I think that's it from me. And I have shared my email ID. I have shared my mobile number.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Koul. Now I would invite Mr. K.R. Nair, our past chairman and the present national councillor, to just summarize the program and do the honors of the felicitation. So, yeah, welcome, K.R.
Good evening, dear friends. We had a wonderful interactive session today. If this would have been a lecture in Pune, most of the people would not have asked questions. Now really good. So we had a very, very interactive session. And I'm really thankful to Jyoti Bhushan to accept our request and give us such a nice lecture. And he has given the real risk factors. Now it is up to us to analyze and find out a way how to get out of it. With this, I would like to present a small memento to him. The real big memento is waiting for him. The day he comes to Pune, we will hand over to him. Thank you, Jyoti Bhushan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.